They didn't ask who I was. They just said thanks for the cake and moved on. I stood there, right next to it. 3 days, 6 hours, and nearly 100 sugar flowers. But all they saw was someone who worked the wedding. I wasn't wearing black or an apron. I didn't have a clipboard. But still they called me the help. And the bride. She's my sister. I came early that morning. Sunday wasn't fully up yet. The trees were still dripping dew, and the air smelled like warm grass and something sweet like sugar melting. The Whitmore estate sat quiet and perfect, just like in the photos Vanessa sent. Big porch, white railings, oak trees so tall they touched the sky. I parked off to the side where deliveries usually go. Habit, I guess. I carried the cake in by myself. 3 tiers, vanilla almond. Light lemon curd between each layer. It smelled like spring. Like the cakes Mom used to make when we were little. I placed it gently on the display table right near the edge of the patio. Hydrangeas all around. Everything matched. Cream blush, pale green. Every detail planned. Except me. No one said hello, no one asked if I needed help. One of the servers nodded like I was part of his shift. A woman in heels asked me where the bathroom was. I told her. She didn't even say thank you. Around 9, Vanessa came by. She looked beautiful, of course she did. Hair curled, makeup, flawless robe that looked like it cost more than my rent. "Oh, Diana, great job," she said, smiling quick. "Thanks." Then she turned away. Didn't ask how I was. Didn't introduce me to the girls behind her. Just thanks. Like I'd dropped off balloons. I stayed around to check the frosting. It was holding up okay, though the sun was starting to creep in. People started arriving. Hugs, laughter, clinking glasses. A photographer adjusting light meters. Servers walking around with cucumber water. Someone pointed at me from across the garden and said, "Oh, I think she's with the planner." Another voice louder. "No, she's just the cake lady." I didn't correct them. I couldn't tell you why. I stepped back and looked at the cake. V+M piped on the middle tier, white on white. Subtle, classy. Just like Vanessa wanted. It was perfect. But no one noticed who made it. Not the guests. Not the groom's parents. Not even my own family. I wasn't on the program, wasn't invited to the head table. Wasn't listed anywhere, not as her sister, not as a guest, not even as the baker. Just not there. I thought about Mom. How she used to say, "Baby, if you don't say who you are, someone else will." I used to think that was dramatic. Now I understand. Because standing in that garden surrounded by people who smiled past me like I was background noise, I felt like a stranger in a dress I picked 3 weeks ago, hoping it would be neutral enough to fit in. I stayed quiet. Didn't cry. Didn't leave. Just watched. Watched the way Vanessa floated from group to group, how she called other people my best friend, how she introduced the florist by name, how she clinked glasses with the planner's assistant. How she never said the word sister. And yet I was the one who taught her how to bake. Who helped her fill out college applications. Who paid the first month's rent when she moved to New York. And here I was standing 5 feet from her wedding cake and still invisible. I wasn't wearing a name tag, but they made sure I knew mine didn't matter. So I wiped a speck of sugar off the edge of the table, smoothed the ribbon, and stepped aside like I was trained to. And no one stopped me. Not even her. The apartment smelled like citrus cleaner and old flour. I had left the front window cracked before heading to the venue. The June heat still clung to everything, but a little breeze had crept in. Just enough to stir the curtain. Just enough to remind me I was home. I set my purse down on the counter and turned on the lamp, small, yellow, a little crooked. The ceiling fan above me hummed steady. My shoes stayed by the door. There was a stack of mail I hadn't touched in a week. Maybe more. When you've gotten used to bad news, envelopes start to feel the same. Thick or thin, white or brown, it doesn't matter. You stop expecting anything kind. I picked one up. The envelope said Internal Revenue Service. I frowned, slid my thumb under the seal. Pulled out the letter. Read the first line, then read it again. "Dear Miss Marchand. This is a confirmation of account EIN registration and associated business activity as of Q4. Entity Diana Marchand, LLC. Date of formation, August 2020. I stared at it. LLC. I'd never registered an LLC. Didn't even have a business anymore. I dropped into the kitchen chair, paper still in hand. My mind ran through possibilities: spam, mistake, identity theft. But then I saw it. A copy of the digital signature. My name, in my own handwriting. Diana Marchand. I stood up slowly. Poured a half glass of water. Didn't drink it. My hands were cold. On the fridge was a post-it note: call pharmacy about mom's old allergy refill. I hadn't thrown it out. Just like I hadn't thrown out the last cake box she helped me fold. I picked up the letter again. Read the EIN number twice. My social security digits partially redacted but unmistakable. Something started pressing down in my chest. Not panic. Not yet, just a kind of stillness. The kind that comes before the truth hits. I typed the number listed on the letter. The phone rang twice, then sent me to voicemail. Hi there, a voice said, too casual, too cheery. This is Travis from First Street Commercial Lending. If you're calling about EIN verification or loan draw status, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Please leave a message with your full name and callback number. Thanks, click. I didn't leave a message. I just stood there in my kitchen, letting the silence wrap around me. Something in me had already started believing what I didn't want to believe. I walked over to my bookshelf, the one where I kept old mail-copied documents boxes I never unpacked fully after the divorce. I pulled down a folder labeled 2020. Personal. Half of it was untouched. But wedged in the back, there it was. An email printout from Vanessa. Subject line: use this if you ever need it, just in case Sauzio. Attached a scan of my driver's license. I sat down again. Slower this time. 2 years ago, everything had been falling apart. That spring, I had just signed my divorce papers. Still couldn't sleep right. Doctor had me on something mild, anti-anxiety, nothing heavy, but it blurred the edges just enough to make the days pass in soft focus. Vanessa came by that week. With smoothies. And a clipboard. I just need a couple signatures, she'd said. Some stuff for an account setup, totally boring. Just needs a cosigner while I get things rolling. You won't be tied to anything, just formalities. You trust me, right? I had nodded. Too tired to question, too numb to read, I signed. 3 times, blue ink. Same pen I used to scribble rent checks and apology cards. She smiled, kissed my cheek, said, "You're the best." I remember she left quickly. I remember not asking where she was headed. And I remember something else now. When I asked if I should keep a copy, she waved it off. "I'll scan everything and send it to you later. You don't need to worry." She never did. I sat back in my chair, still holding the letter from the IRS. The corners were soft, now creased from my thumb. Outside, a car passed on the street below. Someone laughed. A dog barked. And in that moment, something shifted in my stomach. Like a door had been opened. And something bitter had walked in. I opened my laptop. It took longer than usual to boot. The fan wheezed like it was tired of helping me through my quiet evenings. I typed in South Carolina business entity search. It's a state database. Public records. Free to anyone who's willing to look. I clicked the link, entered my name. Diana Marchand. At first, nothing. Then, it loaded. Entity name: Diana Marchand, LLC. Status: active formation. Date: the 11th of August 2020. Registered agent: Diana Marchand Business. Address: 135 West Briar Street, Charleston, SC. Nature of business: strategic communications. Public by Stoddard. Relations. I stared at the screen. It didn't blink. Didn't apologize. Didn't ask if I was okay. Just sat there, factual. Unbothered. That address, that wasn't mine. That was Vanessa's office. The one she posted about on Facebook with the exposed brick walls and neon sign that said she built this. The one she said took grit, grace, and late nights. I remembered the first time she posted a picture from that office. I had clicked like. Even commented proud of you. I meant it. I really did. And now, my name had been on it the whole time. Not just as a sister, as the legal founder. I didn't speak. Didn't curse. Didn't cry. I just clicked print. The PDF loaded slowly, every line of ink knowing something I didn't know until now. At the bottom of the page, signed Diana Marchand. In print. In ink. In betrayal. I pressed print. The machine warmed up. Paper fed through. I pulled the sheet out carefully. It was still warm in my hand. I walked it to the kitchen. Set it gently next to the slice of cake I hadn't touched since getting home. Vanilla almond. Same recipe I used for the wedding. Sweet. Soft. Familiar. And now sitting right next to it, a contract that had stolen my name, my trust, and my silence. No ribbon. No thank you note, just my signature. Against me. I sat back down at the table. The paper still warm. The cake still untouched. The air inside the apartment had changed, not louder, not colder, just heavier. I looked again at my signature on the document, and then I saw her face. Vanessa sitting across from me 2 years ago. Fresh hair, gold hoop earrings. A smoothie half drunk beside her. She had been smiling. Soft, persuasive, like she was doing me a favor. Just a few forms, she said. I need a cosigner for a few weeks. It's nothing binding. I hadn't asked for details. She knew I wouldn't. I had been tired. Still reeling from court dates and boxes of things labeled his. Still forgetting to eat some days. Still trying to call Mom only to remember there was no number anymore. And Vanessa had timed it perfectly. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because now I know this wasn't a moment of impulse. It was preparation. She didn't forge anything. She didn't steal my name in the dark. She walked in smiling and handed me the pen. And I held it. I trusted her. I signed. That's the part that hurts most. Not that she took it, but that she didn't think twice about using me. That she knew I would hand over the one thing I had left intact, my name, without a second glance. I closed the laptop. The fan whirred to a stop. Outside, the wind had picked up. I could hear it brushing against the windows like it was trying to warn me late. But it was too late. Not for the truth that was finally here sitting on my counter. But too late for what I used to believe about my sister. I folded the letter from the IRS. Then the business registration. Then the printout with my signature. No rush. No shaking hands, just quiet steps. I pulled a small envelope from the drawer, one of those brown ones with a metal clasp. The kind Mom used to file grocery coupons in. I slid the papers inside, pressed it closed. Wrote one word on the front in slow, even letters. Proof. That's all it was now. Not a theory. Not a suspicion. Just proof. I placed it in the bottom drawer of the sideboard. The one where I keep old measuring spoons and the manual for a toaster I no longer own. It didn't deserve a safe. But it didn't belong in the trash either. I stared at the drawer for a long moment, then turned away. The cake was still on the table. Perfect slice. Vanilla almond. Same recipe, same smell. But now it made my stomach turn. I didn't throw it out. Didn't cover it up either. I just walked past it. Turned off the kitchen light, let the fan hum overhead. And for the first time that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not sadness. Not even shock. Clarity. The kind that makes everything quiet before it starts to move. I wasn't just the help, I was the silent investor who never consented. The hallway outside the bridal suite smelled like hairspray and roses. Someone was laughing behind the door, short, high, like it wasn't real. The kind of laugh you force when cameras are nearby. I stood still for a second. Took one breath. Then two. The cake topper was in a box in my hands. I had almost forgotten it myself. Vanessa texted last night just one line. Do you still have the V+M topper? Forgot it at yours. No hi, no thank you. Just the same way she always reached for things like they were already hers. I pushed the door open gently. Didn't want to make an entrance, didn't want to stay. Inside it was a cloud of perfume and silk. Mirrors lined the far wall each, reflecting a version of the bride and her girls, one fixing her dress, one brushing shimmer on her shoulders, one scrolling through photos from last night. Vanessa stood in the center. Her gown was still unzipped at the back. Her arms lifted as someone misted setting spray over her face. Hi, I said quiet. A planner looked up first. Then Vanessa. Oh, the topper, she said. Didn't say my name. Didn't ask how I was. I nodded and held out the box. One of the assistants came over to take it. I handed it off, careful not to bump any of the curling irons scattered across the side table. Vanessa turned back to the mirror, practiced a smile, tilted her chin. I stood for half a second too long. No one looked at me again. I turned to go. Didn't say goodbye. As I reached the door, a soft voice behind me said, "Oh dear, excuse me." I turned and saw her. Miss Eloise. I remembered her from the rehearsal dinner. Older woman. Dressed in navy with little pearl buttons. One of the Whitmore's longtime friends. She had dropped her handbag, its contents spilled across the floor like a slow-motion apology. I bent down beside her. Lipstick mince tissues folded twice, a tiny bottle of eye drops. I picked them up one by one, placing them gently back into her purse. Thank you, sweetheart, she said. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the last item still lying on the floor. It was a folded envelope. Cream-colored. Edges slightly worn. I recognized the handwriting the second I saw it. Not because I'd seen it recently, but because I'd seen it my whole life. The capital D had that little curl at the top, the way Mom used to write mine. The ink was slightly faded, like she'd pressed softly as if afraid the paper might bruise. It said in simple, steady letters, "For Diana." I froze. Miss Eloise looked at me, then at the envelope. Her eyes softened. Oh, she said. I'm so sorry, this must have slipped in with mine. Vanessa asked me to hold on to some things a while back, and I never checked them properly. She handed it to me like it weighed nothing. But in my hands, it felt heavier than anything I'd carried that morning. I didn't open it right away. I stood up slowly, said thank you, and walked out of the suite before anyone else noticed. The door clicked shut behind me. Out in the hallway, the light was softer. Quiet. Only the sound of a dryer humming from somewhere down the hall. I walked to the far end toward the staff stairwell and sat down on the top step. Then I unfolded the letter. The paper had that faint lavender smell. It used to be Mom's scent hand lotion from the drugstore, a bottle she always kept in her purse. Even now, even here, the smell hadn't faded. It felt like she was near. And then I read the first line. If you're reading this, it means Vanessa gave this to you. I hope she did. My hands went still. If you're reading this, it means Vanessa gave this to you. I hope she did. The ink was a little shaky in places. Not like Mom. Maybe she wrote it when she was tired. Or hurting. Or near the end. I didn't want to make a big deal. You know, I never liked fuss. But I didn't want to leave this world without saying one last thing just for you. I blinked. Not to cry, just to keep reading. You've always been the quiet one. The steady one. I know I didn't say it enough, but I noticed. You held things together when no one else could. Especially after your father passed. I could hear her voice as I read. Warm. A little dry. Practical. The kind of woman who brought sandwiches to the hospital waiting room. The kind who remembered birthdays, never needed a calendar. I'm leaving something for you. It's not much, but it's from me. When we sold the old house, I asked the lawyer to put aside a portion under your name. A small account separate from everything else. I told Vanessa where it was. Told her to give you this letter too. My hand gripped the paper a little tighter. I know I've asked a lot of you over the years. to be patient, to make room. But I never wanted you to feel small, Diana. You were always the anchor in this family. I paused. The hallway was still empty, still quiet. But something inside me was shifting. Like a window that had been painted shut, had just cracked open. I hope when you read this you're doing something that's yours. That you've kept baking. That you remember I was proud of you every single day. And if Vanessa gave you this letter, then maybe things are still okay between you two. Maybe she remembered who you are. She signed it "Love Always, Mom." I read it again and again. And then I folded the letter slowly, carefully. Tucked it back into the envelope, pressed the flap closed, like sealing a wound that had taken too long to find. I didn't cry, didn't gasp, didn't curse Vanessa out loud. But deep down somewhere between the last word and the empty hallway I knew exactly what had happened. Vanessa hadn't forgotten to give me this. She chose not to. I sat there for a long while. Just me, the letter, and the sound of a distant blow-dryer behind the bridal suite door. And I started tracing it back. Not the words in the letter, but the space between them. The house had been sold 4 months after Mom passed. I remembered the phone call. Vanessa said she'd take care of everything: title, lawyer, final paperwork. Said I didn't need to stress. "You've got the bakery," she'd said. "I'll handle the forms." At the time, I was still driving out to the cemetery every Sunday. Still baking through grief. Still waking up halfway to tears. I let her do it. Let her be the responsible one. She said she'd keep me updated. I believed her. But now, thinking back, there'd been no check. No email, no follow-up. Just a passing mention once. Nothing big came out of it. Property taxes and back fees ate most of it. And I'd let that answer sit. Like dust on a shelf I never got around to cleaning. The small account Mom mentioned, I'd never heard of it. Not until today. And that house, the one we grew up in with the peeling shutters and the squeaky porch swing, it had memories baked into its walls. And money tied to its sale. And Vanessa. She knew that. She had the password. She had the letter. She had the choice. And she kept it all to herself. I looked down at the envelope again. Faint lavender. Edges worn like it had been held once, then hidden. Not lost. Hidden. And not just the paper, but what it stood for. Mom's voice. Her final words. Her last gift. None of it was ever supposed to come from Vanessa. She was only supposed to pass it on. But instead, she made it hers. By deciding I didn't need it. I walked down the stairwell slowly. Letter folded back into its envelope. Each step creaked under my feet. Outside, the sun had shifted. A soft light touched the top of the azalea hedges lining the brick path. I crossed the garden. No one saw me. The patio was still alive with laughter. Champagne flutes clinking, satin skirts brushing against folding chairs. Someone was passing out place cards, calling out names. But mine. No one called mine. I kept walking until I reached the bakery delivery van I'd borrowed for the weekend. The back was already empty, cake delivered, flowers arranged. Only a few crumbs from ribbon trimmings remained on the passenger seat. I slid the letter onto the dashboard. Flat. Silent. And then I sat there. Engine off. Hands resting in my lap. No tears. Just breath. Long, steady breath. Like I was finally coming up for air after holding it for too long. It wasn't about the money. Or even the letter. It was about the space between what's said and what's kept. The decisions made in silence. The erasures no one else sees. Vanessa didn't just keep a letter. She rewrote the ending of someone else's life, mine. She handed out roles in this story, and mine was never meant to speak. But now that I had the truth in my hands, the weight of ink and lavender and a mother's trust, I could feel something shifting. Not loud, not dramatic. Just real. The only thing I inherited from all of this was silence. But silence, when chosen, can be power. And I had just decided not to keep hers anymore. I wore navy. Simple. Clean. A-line hem brushing the tops of my ankles. Vanessa had said black would be too dramatic for the photos. And it wasn't lost on me how she said that while posing in a dress that glittered like champagne under $10,000 lighting. I adjusted the strap of my clutch. The fabric was soft hand-stitched with little peonies. Mom had given it to both of us one Christmas years ago. Vanessa's was pale pink. Mine was midnight blue. That felt right now. Because in my bag wasn't lipstick or tissues. It was truth. Unfolded, backed up, time-stamped, and loaded on a USB. I'd renamed the file carefully Cake Designer, shorttoast.mp4. Just like the others in the folder. One of the bridesmaids had mentioned they were compiling short thank you videos to play after the toasts. A sweet touch. A polished touch. Very Vanessa, so I'd asked for a spot. Just a small thank you from the cake designer, I said to the planner. She nodded distracted. Of course on. After the maid of honor. And just like that, my name was on the list. No one questioned it. I guess no one ever does when you speak softly and smile just enough. They don't see the intention behind your calm. Or the blade behind your courtesy. The tech coordinator was a young man in a crisp white shirt, his sleeves rolled neatly. His posture military straight. Efficient. Unbothered. The kind of person who'd never ask why a file was named what it was, just where it needed to go. Here's the USB, I said, holding it between two fingers. Short toast, cake designer. It's already labeled. He gave a polite nod, took it and slotted it into the laptop stationed behind the reception tent. Rows of names glowed on the screen: father of the bride, maid of honor, college roommate. He added mine to the list without a second glance. I watched him drag the file down just below Vanessa's college roommate. Right before the maid of honor's clip. Perfect. Timing mattered more than delivery. That's what Vanessa used to say when she coached her clients through rebrands and launches and little scandals. Your message is only as strong as your delivery. She'd grin. Sip something with elderflower and ice. I wonder what she'd think now. About delivery mechanisms. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of the cake. It stood under the garden pergola like a little ivory sculpture, flecks of gold leaf catching the low sun. 4 tiers alternating almond and lemon sponge. Real flowers tucked into its curves, hydrangea, blush peonies, tiny sprigs of rosemary. And just in front of it, a girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, hair pulled into 2 puffs. Wearing a lemon-colored dress with tiny birds printed along the hem, she was crouched slightly, holding her phone up to snap a photo. I smiled. Knelt beside her slow. You like it? She blinked up at me, then nodded. It's perfect. I looked at the cake again. At the sugar pearls. The edge piping. The stillness of it. Not yet, I whispered. I walked the perimeter of the reception lawn like I wasn't supposed to be seen. Which was easy because no one noticed. Servers carried trays of champagne flutes, the bubbles catching warm afternoon light like tiny comets. Guests in pastel suits and floral silk laughed in clusters, adjusting their sunglasses, scanning for familiar faces. I moved behind them like a shadow. The AV guy had placed the laptop behind a modest screen beside the stage. Not locked, but passworded. It didn't matter. I wasn't there to tamper. I just needed to be sure. I stood far enough not to look suspicious, but close enough to hear the soft click of someone testing a mic. Check, check. Maid of honor video up next, followed by a toast from Diana Marchand. The name hung there for a beat, then vanished into the hum of cocktail chatter. My hand slid into the side pocket of my clutch. The fabric was soft deep navy with little embroidered violets. Mom gave it to me on my 35th birthday. Said it matched the way I carried myself, quiet but steady. Inside I felt the second USB, just in case. I had made 2 copies, call it paranoia. Or foresight. The real video, the one no one expected, was already loaded. All I needed was for them to press play. I tucked the clutch back under my arm and made my way past the hydrangea arch. A bridesmaid in dusty rose almost bumped into me. Oh, hi, sorry, are you? Here with catering? I smiled. Something like that. She giggled and walked on, already absorbed in her reflection on her phone screen. I didn't correct her. Not yet. The music shifted, soft jazz gave way to piano. Guests began drifting toward their seats near the canopy where the toast sequence would begin. I stood off to the side near a marble birdbath surrounded by lavender. From here I could see the tech table, the mic, and the glint of Vanessa's sequined gown as she air-kissed someone's cheek. Her laughter rang out bright, effortless. The sound of someone who believed everything was under control. A breeze lifted the edge of my dress. I smoothed it down, holding the clutch steady. Just then I noticed a little girl crouched by the cake table holding up a phone with both hands, snapping photos from every angle, completely absorbed. She wore a pale blue dress with white ruffles. Maybe 7 or 8 years old. I walked over and crouched beside her. "You like it?" I asked. She looked up, eyes wide. "It's perfect," she whispered. "It looks like it belongs in a storybook." I smiled. "Not yet," I murmured. She blinked, puzzled, but I gently tapped her shoulder and stood. Let her wonder. From behind me, I heard the planner's voice calling names: bridesmaids, groomsmen, the maid of honor. My name wasn't on her clipboard, but it didn't need to be. I'd already reserved my place, with the USB, with the words that had waited too long. As the guests settled into their chairs, napkins in laps and flutes in hand, I walked the slow path toward the stage steps. Not rushing, not rehearsing, just breathing. 1, 2. I stood at the foot of the stage. My heels sank slightly into the lawn as the maid of honor finished her toast, sweet, bubbly, forgettable. Laughter, applause, champagne clinks. Then the tech guy glanced down at his list and called my name almost as an afterthought. And now a quick word from the cake designer, Miss Diana Marchand. There was a moment's pause. Not confusion, just blankness. As if the name didn't match any face in the crowd. Until Vanessa's head tilted, just slightly, her smile faltered. I walked up without waiting. No introduction. No excuse. The mic felt too tall, too bright. I didn't adjust it. "Hi," I said, barely above a whisper. The AV guy nodded at me from the back. I gave a small nod in return. And the screen behind me flickered to life. No dramatic music, no transition slides, just a quiet montage. A series of emails, scanned loan documents. My signature lifted from a scanned license. The name of a business I never started attached to a debt I never chose. Then, a second image. A letter in my mother's handwriting. The one I found yesterday. The one meant for me, buried in a stranger's purse. The words were simple. Straight from the page. I didn't need to read them aloud. They were projected for everyone to see. Vanessa's face was frozen. Not with anger. Not yet, just disbelief. The kind that sets in when someone realizes the story they've told, the role they've assigned you, is unraveling in front of an audience. I stepped back. No dramatic exit, no eye contact. Just quiet steps down from the stage. And as the video faded to black, I heard the wind stir again. Lavender. Vanilla. And something else. The sound of silence when no one knows what to say. We'd like to invite Diana Marchand, the brilliant cake designer, to say a few words. That's what the MC said, and the words echoed longer than they should have. People looked around, polite confusion on their faces, trying to remember if they'd even seen me all night. I stood slowly. No one clapped. No one knew why I was standing. I wasn't wearing anything dramatic, just a navy dress. Simple, comfortable, unmemorable. I didn't smile. And I didn't walk to the mic like it was a stage. I walked like it was a door I'd been locked behind for too long. The room fell quiet, more from curiosity than respect. I could hear forks stop moving on plates. The hum of string lights overhead, someone's champagne flute being set down too quickly. When I reached the mic, I paused. Then I said quietly but clearly I was asked to speak as the one who made the cake. A few nods. Some smiles from guests who still didn't recognize me as Vanessa's sister. I'm honored you all liked it. I've been baking since I was 12. My mother taught me. She used to say a good cake is never just sugar, it's memory. Another pause. I heard a sniffle near the front. Probably someone moved by the sentiment. Then I kept going. But I'm not just the one who made the cake. I looked at Vanessa. She was laughing at something Marcus whispered until she caught my eye. I held her gaze. I'm also the person Vanessa used to start this life you all just toasted. There it was. The first crack in the room's temperature. Like a thermostat had been silently turned down 5 degrees. And I hadn't raised my voice, not even once. I didn't know 2 years ago that, when Vanessa asked me to sign a couple of things during my divorce, she was signing me into a business loan, under my name, with my social security number, with my identity. There was a ripple now like a slow wind rolling through rows of seated guests. People shifted in their chairs. I saw someone glance down at their program as if it might explain what was happening. I didn't flinch, didn't soften. She said it was just a formality. Something to help her get her PR firm off the ground. She said, just be a good sister. So I signed, while on medication. While grieving the loss of my marriage. While trusting her. I let the silence settle, no one interrupted. I heard the clink of one wine glass tipping slightly against a charger plate. Someone whispered, "What is she saying?" But no one answered. Vanessa's smile was gone. She was no longer glowing. And Marcus. His hand had stopped moving on the back of her chair. I took a small breath, enough to ground myself. But that wasn't the only thing she kept from me. I pulled the envelope from my clutch. The paper was soft, cream-colored, still faintly scented like lavender. I found this yesterday. A letter. From my mother. Meant for me. I turned it slightly so the guests could see the familiar loops of handwriting across the front. To Diana from Mom. My mother left me this letter before she passed. She gave it to Vanessa and trusted her to deliver it. I held it up. Inside, she wrote about a small investment account from the house sale. She wanted me to have it. She said I always put others first and that it was time someone put me first. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle. But I never got that letter. Not until yesterday. I found it tucked inside someone else's purse. By accident. Vanessa's face was pale now. Not red. Not angry. Just pale. Like someone watching a memory collapse in real time. She never told me. Not about the money. Not about the message. Not even about Mom's final words meant for me. There was a hush that felt different this time. Less curious, more uneasy. The kind of silence that comes when people start realizing they're not at a celebration anymore, but at a reckoning. I placed the envelope back in my clutch, careful not to fold it. Then, I looked up. Straight into the crowd. You toasted to a beautiful story tonight. A love story. A sisterhood. A successful businesswoman. A family legacy. I let the list hang. But all of that was built on a signature that wasn't given freely and a silence that wasn't mine to carry. I nodded once to the AV assistant near the side of the room. He was already waiting. He clicked a key on his laptop. The lights dimmed slightly, and the screen behind me lit up. No intro slide, no music. Just black text on a white background. Diana Marchand. Loan application documents dated March 2020, pages flipped in slow succession. My name. My social security number. Vanessa's business address. The bank officer's email chain confirming the EIN matched mine. Some guests leaned forward. Others looked down. Uncomfortable. Unsure where to place their eyes. The next slide, a screenshot of the scanned license I had sent Vanessa. Subject line, just in case towed, a woman at the far table gasped. Someone else whispered, she really used her. And then came the image of the letter. My mother's handwriting. The closing sentence, I hope Vanessa gave this to you when I asked. But if not, I still love you and I always saw you. I saw someone cover their mouth. I didn't look at Vanessa. Not yet. I let the screen speak. It was calm, it was quiet. But it was undeniable. I heard Marcus shift beside her. His chair scraped slightly against the floor. He leaned back. And for the first time that evening, he didn't touch her hand. I turned off the screen with one nod. No dramatics, no final slide, no music swelling, just stillness. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her hand trembled slightly around her champagne glass. She tried to laugh just once, like maybe it was all a joke, but no one laughed with her. Marcus slowly turned his chair away just a few inches, but it felt like a mile. His arm fell off the back of her seat. His eyes didn't find mine. They stared straight ahead, and the room held its breath. Somewhere behind me, a guest's fork dropped to a plate. The clink echoed far too loud. I stepped back from the mic. No final speech. No anger. No apology. I just said softly so only the first few rows could really hear. You didn't just erase me. You replaced me until I stood back up. And then I placed the mic gently on the linen-covered table. Walked past rows of stunned faces, past centerpieces, past the place cards I had helped design. No one stopped me. No one called my name. I walked straight into the quiet they'd always given me. Only this time, I carried it on my own terms. The sign wasn't flashy. Just white paint on sanded wood hung by two hooks that creaked when the wind shifted. Marchand and Mother hand-painted slightly uneven. Not trying to impress. Just trying to exist. No gold foil. No digital banner. Just sunlight and cinnamon. It was early fall. The kind of morning where the air smelled like coffee and turning leaves. Diana stood behind the counter, the sleeves of her cotton blouse rolled up, rearranging cranberry orange scones into a neat diagonal. One leaned slightly. She let it be. The shop had only been open for 20 minutes. No line, no fanfare, just quiet. And that was enough. The bell over the door jingled. A soft breeze slipped in, carrying lavender and old perfume. "Good morning," Diana said. Miss Eloise stood in the doorway holding a bunch of wildflowers wrapped in tissue. "I brought these from my garden," she said, voice soft. "They looked like they wanted to be here." Diana smiled more with her eyes than her lips. "Then they're in the right place." She took the flowers, found an old milk glass vase behind the register, and began arranging them gently. Lavender, rosemary, white mums. The smell reminded her of her mother's bedside table. "I don't know what happened that night," Miss Eloise said, not looking directly at her, "but thank you. I think some people needed to see what truth looks like." Diana didn't answer. She placed the vase next to the register beside a small brass plate that read, "Owned and operated by Diana Marchand." A teenage assistant came from the back holding a tray of iced cookies. "Where should these go?" Diana nodded to the front case. "Top shelf. Beside the lemon bars." The assistant grinned. "Got it." Moments passed. Quiet ones. The kind she never got during Vanessa's wedding week. The kind where no one needed anything from her except what she chose to offer. Then came the soft footsteps of a father and daughter. She looked no older than 6, wearing rain boots on a clear day, hair braided with purple ribbons. "Cupcakes," the girl whispered, pointing at the glass case. "Daddy, look." Her father chuckled. "One for each of us." Then Diana bent slightly behind the counter. "Chocolate or vanilla?" "Chocolate," the girl said without hesitation. As Diana boxed 2 cupcakes, the girl looked up again. "Did you make all these?" Diana nodded, placing the lid gently on the box. "I did. They're perfect." And for the first time in a long while, Diana believed that might be true. After the pair left with their treats, she moved to the front door and flipped the sign open. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. No cameras. No gasps. Just the morning light falling across the sidewalk. Just the scent of almond and cinnamon curling from her doorway. Some stories didn't need revenge, just a witness. And Diana. She'd finally learned how to see herself. Sometimes the loudest kind of justice is the kind no one sees coming. Opening that bakery with Mom's name on the sign, it didn't fix everything. But it gave me back the one thing no one can take again: my voice. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. People don't always remember the quiet ones until the quiet ones stop agreeing to be forgotten. And in families, silence can be louder than betrayal unless we choose to break it with truth and grace. If this story brought something up in you, I hope you'll share it in the comments. Or just take a moment to remember someone in your life who may still be waiting to be seen.